In the last episode of Skeptic Explains, I asked for you to write questions for me to answer in the comments section, and one of the examples that I gave was, what is postmodernism? Now I realize this isn't fair, and it wasn't exactly the most popular question that I got, but lots of you did ask that exact question. So, what is postmodernism? Is postmodernism bad? Yep. Okay, sort of. Not exactly. Postmodernism is a method of philosophical thought. It's a lens to view the world through. On its own, it's harmless. It's sort of like a thought experiment. From a historical standpoint, it's very interesting to watch the great debate that postmodernism has started. And, evolutionarily, it makes sense that it's so prevalent in politics, entertainment, and education today. Love it or hate it, postmodernism is likely here to stay. You should learn what it is. Postmodernism was a movement that was born as a response to modernism. So we need to have a little refresher course on modernism to get a proper picture of where postmodernism is today. Modernism was a movement that was born as a response to the way that industrialization had... this could go on for days. Let's just do a short history lesson. In a nutshell, I'm just gonna paint a picture for you. The world used to be ruled by monarchs, kings, queens, pharaohs, popes, what have you. But as technology improved and communication became easier for lower class people, it became easier for the general public to learn about more abstract concepts. The very concept of philosophy even became more widespread among normal, everyday people. It led to the general public becoming more aware and frustrated with the monarchy and the aristocrats that had most of the power and money. This led to a period known as the Enlightenment era. It was kind of the red pill of the 18th century. Enlightenment spawned a hatred for monarchy and religious authority, and a lot of simple modern concepts were born of it, like liberty, freedom, tolerance, progression, constitutional government, and the separation of church and state, as well as things like deductive reasoning, logic, the scientific method, even objective truth. The Enlightenment era drove the Industrial Revolution into high gear and created industrialized cities and a huge exodus from rural farming and a large growth of population in urban areas. This was the birth of the middle class. Eventually, this is how modernism rose up. The modern movement was born of the age of reason and logic and took it to its next logical step. A rise in rational thinkers who reject unprovable things like spiritualism and religion and embrace provable concepts like the scientific method, believing only what you can prove. Naturally, this is how God died, as Nietzsche put it. The world was not only just more secular now, atheism was becoming more widespread. People were no longer driven by their identity based on religion, and they were now driven by identifying with other concepts like patriotism, capitalism, communism, fascism. Knowledge was expanding, the world was mapped, technologies were improving life, society was becoming more organized and institutionalized, art was challenging conventions, and it also brought concepts like the American dream. Modernism had turned into a unified concept of progress and development through logic and scientific endeavor. Modernism led to great achievements like the moon landing. Wait, no, that was a hoax. The idea was institutions knew best. They would tell you what to eat. But then World War I and World War II happened, as well as the invention of the nuclear bomb, something that could kill everyone and everything on Earth. And the Cold War happened, which basically held the entire planet hostage. All of these things led to the realization that those same institutions we trusted would progress us into the future are just as likely to destroy us. This is where postmodernism comes in. Postmodernism is a direct response to modernism, and that response was, no, you're wrong.
In fact, postmodernism is the rejection of Western civilization as you know it.
Well, Actually, it kind of is. Postmodernism does not replace modernism. The two sort of coexist as competing ideas. You don't really have to align yourself with just one concept. It's not a tenet of postmodernism to reject everything, but it does question everything. It doesn't just question everything from modernism, though. It goes all the way back to when the concepts of truth and logic were adopted. The Enlightenment era. That's how you end up with arguments like,
science as a whole is a product of Western modernity, and the whole thing should be scratched off.
the certainty that society had that institutions would use science to progress us into the future was shattered. Now, there is no longer a unified value system, unified moral system, unified identities. There's no longer a trust in institutionalized science or institutionalized government. Structure is replaced with endless choice. People are left to find their own meaning in life, their own form of logic, their own personal philosophies even. Identity is now a commodity, something people are thirsty for, but at the same time, completely unsure of. Oh fuck, I ended that sentence in a preposition. I know people are gonna disagree with me here, but the breaking point was the 1960s. Uncle Sam was peddling the institution, sending sons to die in some jungle, and the public had had enough. We're still seeing the same battle happen today. Postmodernism as a philosophical movement is basically impossible to define. There is absolutely no unification of ideals. However, some postmodern thinkers, artists, entertainers, or what have you, seem to have more influence than others, which leads to a great deal of... You guys watching the news lately?
Oh shit, he's got a fucked up cat.
Pressure, causing pressure.
Part of the reason the movement is impossible to define has to do with the way that the philosophy creates uncertainty about everything it studies. It's about breaking down conventions and questioning their validity, dissecting everything we know until it dies, and watching it die, and then putting the pieces back together, and in theory that helps us understand it better. This can reaffirm the importance of certain conventions and value systems that we hold. You may in fact be employing inventions of postmodernism like nihilistic humor, or even the shitpost. Art, culture, entertainment, all are influenced by postmodernism. Okay, I think I've spent enough time sucking postmodernism's dick. I'll answer the biggest question most of you have. What is wrong with postmodernism? Like I said, postmodernists question traditions and conventions, including concepts that came from the entire Enlightenment era. Scientific method, logic, reason, deduction. Well, some in the movement flat out reject those concepts. At the university level, this means the humanities, social sciences, they seem to be following a trend of rejecting the old world logic and substituting it with their understanding of their subjects through a postmodernist lens. Without empiricism, they develop their own version of truth through their own version of reason, rejecting ideas like universal truths and absolutes. Basically, any conclusions that society had come to in the past is now up for question, is up for debate again. What this has created is a giant gap in our ability for the two camps to communicate ideas with each other. It's almost as if people on university campuses, on Parliament Hill, in media and entertainment are speaking two different languages, and that makes things very difficult from a skeptical or from a debate perspective. How do two sexy people come to a logical conclusion if they both employ different versions of logic? Concepts like privilege, patriarchy, cultural appropriation, toxic masculinity, rape culture, everything being a social construct. These are all postmodernist ideas that can only be properly explained or properly explored or proven through the lens of postmodernism. And that's why it's so hard to get empirically minded, scientifically minded, logically minded, reasonably minded people to swallow these concepts. There was always an ongoing joke in academia that the social sciences are mostly nonsense. Today, that divide is exacerbated by the new language postmodernists use, or their shop talk, if you will, which is impossible to understand if you aren't initiated.
I think the effect is pretty clear. It allows people to take a very radical stance, you know, more radical than thou, but to be completely dissociated from anything that's happening. for many reasons. One reason is nobody can understand a word they're saying, so they're already dissociated. It's kind of like a private lingo.
Often these concepts make their way from an academic platform and completely unfiltered end up somehow on some shit news site that uses them as clickbait, and it only serves to confuse the fuck out of the uninitiated. Outside of a group of people who have taken, say, gender studies, these things don't make much sense. I'm not even joking. It's two different languages. If you've ever been in an argument with a social justice warrior, for example, you may feel like no matter how well you make your points, they just don't seem to get it. Well, likely they're feeling the same way about you. Postmodernists replace facts and proofs with narratives. Evidence either proves or disproves a narrative. To a postmodernist, they may see a debate as being their narrative versus your narrative. What this has created is a generation of students with a completely different mindset than previous generations. Postmodernism isn't all bad. It's given us some amazing things. It's merely a medium, a type of canvas. It's how one uses that medium that defines one's character as an intellectual. Like always, please leave a question in the comments section below, and I'll answer one of my favorite questions in the next episode of Skeptic Explains. Thank you for watching. If you like what you saw and you'd like to see more Armoured Skeptic, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you absolutely love me, you can support me on Patreon, or if you have a passing affection for me, you can buy my merch. Links are in the description.